So Pedro Castillo has had basically like a neoliberal rollback where, we're unsure how much US or Western influence is there, although it has to be somewhat because the US has been deeply involved in Peru for a long time. But now Castillo has basically started replacing the Marxists and the Marxist Leninists in his administration with neoliberals. So that's bad news, but that's the risk you take always when you're struggling for socialism, but especially when you take this electoral route, right? When you don't have like a real revolution, when you basically just take a teacher, a union leader like Castillo, and have him run as part of a Marxist party. Like, it was a great step in the right direction for Peru, but it's difficult to defend the revolution from that perspective. But we also had victories of the Sandinista Party in late November in Nicaragua, as well. Probably even more impactful to Central and Latin America was the victory of Xiomara Castro Zelaya in Honduras, which is, if you don't know, Honduras and Nicaragua, it's basically like a Colombia-Venezuela situation where they're bordering each other, and Honduras has traditionally been a right-wing pro-U.S. country who the U.S. uses to launch attacks at Nicaragua through. But now Honduras, and that was propped up by a U.S.-backed coup in 2009 of Zelaya's father, I believe. So now the progressive socialists are back in power in Honduras. So you're having a socialist bloc, anti-imperialist bloc sort of form in Central and Latin America, despite the sort of neoliberal rollbacks we're seeing in Peru. So yeah, thoughts on that or concerns about that, Matt?
That's kind of a lot.
Yeah, sorry, I threw
I
a
haven't
lot
looked
at you.
at. Yeah, no, it's fine. I haven't looked enough at Peru to really um get that great of an understanding of the situation. Um,
Yeah,
I've been
boy.
so in our politics in the developing world class. I've been looking at um Cuba and Venezuela specifically, and Burkina Faso. So those are the countries that I've been like really looking at this semester. But I think the wins in Nicaragua and Honduras, who were already being like demonized by the media. CNN, I just looked up this article, is claiming that the Ortega election is a fraud, and it's they called it a parody. Is the quote that CNN uses, even though there were international observers there. Um, but the thing with the Nicaragua election is, or I think it was either Nicaragua or Honduras, but of the countries, the opposition party to the leftist party uh, boycotted the election. So they ended up losing the election and then went back and claimed that it was fraud, even though they boycotted the election. So
Hmm.
I don't know. It's kind of stupid.
That's becoming a very typical strategy when the U.S. opposition party knows there's basically no chance of winning. They'll just boycott the elections, and then they'll try and, because they know they're going to lose regardless, so they'll try and tilt the result as much in favor of the Socialist Party as they can. And then they'll say, look, the Socialist Party got 36% support and the opposition party got 1%. Like, clearly the elections were rigged. It's like, no, nobody, it's just that nobody wants this, like, right-wing, corporatist, pro-U.S. traitor party that is the U.S.-backed opposition parties in Venezuela and Nicaragua. I mean, in Nicaragua, they had Fujimori, or no, or was that in Honduras? No, no, that was in Peru.
That was Honduras.
Uh,
Oh
well,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it happens a lot, but in Peru, Fujimori was like the daughter of a former U.S.-backed Peruvian dictator. It's like they can't even find new family members to do the U.S.'s imperialist bidding in Latin America, and the people are becoming privy to it. They're like not falling for this stuff anymore.
Yeah, speaking of like nepotism within opposition parties and just like the fact that the opposition backs America so heavily, I think it's funny how like Anna Navarro.
Yes.
Yeah, so she's on The View, for those of you who don't know, like the political talk show. with Meghan McCain and Whoopi Goldberg. It's a great show. I'd highly recommend it.
High
But
quality, top
Anna
tier.
Navarro, yeah, her dad was she was born to a wealthy landowning family in Nicaragua, and she's the daughter of a leader of the Contras, who like massacred a lot of people in Nicaragua and fought against the Sandinista government. And now she's able to speak on one of the most watched political shows on earth without like any pushback or any like, hey, your dad is kind of a piece of shit, you know that? Or like any of that. There's no recollection or like making sure that this doesn't happen again, I guess.
Right, and
Honey, what are you whining about?
that's so classic. The U.S. State Department and media props up the most horrific like characters you could ever imagine. There was one in, I believe it was Leopoldo Lopez was the name of the guy in Venezuela who like stole a government
Yeah, I was just gonna bring
helicopter.
him up.
Yeah, he was firing grenades at the capital of Venezuela, and then like they didn't even arrest him. They just like he fled the country, and now the U.S. props that guy up like he's a hero who escaped the dictatorship. It's like, the U.S. State Department would not allow people to fire grenades at the White House. Those people would be arrested, and you wouldn't consider that authoritarian. It's it's insane when you imagine like other countries doing the shit that the U.S. does to them. If you like put the shoe on the other foot, you can't even like wrap your head around it.
I think about that all the time. Whenever I post TikToks about like, hey, we shouldn't overthrow democratically elected leaders in other countries, I always get like conservative shitheads who are like, well, actually, overthrowing socialism is good because it helps the people. And I'm always like, okay, so like, let's say hypothetically, um, we had like a far right government who's like, actually, Biden didn't win the election. Trump's claims of fraud are correct. So we're gonna like oust Biden and then throw Trump in there with like a fascist government backing him. For example, like, would you not? I don't know. Find that a little strange. Like,
Right?
just imagine if that happened to you. That's the biggest thing is like people don't really care if we overthrow governments across the world because it's over there, right? Like we don't care about other people around the world because they're not Americans, baby. But I mean, if that were to
Meanwhile,
happen to us, we would be the biggest butthurt babies ever.
I mean, look at their reaction to the Capitol riots, like CNN. They're still covering that like day after day, and they're calling it an attempted coup. And it's like, well, that is what the U.S. orchestrates abroad, but imagine those people actually took control of the government. And then you had like the shaman Trump guy running the government, like, or these right wing
Right.
goons running the government. Like that's sort of what the Contras were, like these right wing gangs, just murdering people funded by the U.S. who took control of the country.
Right. Imagine if they weren't like upper middle class white people and instead like highly trained um forces from another country entering your capital. Like that's
Right?
what the US does is with the highly trained forces. That's what they've done like all throughout Latin America. But here it was just like there was a bunch of like real estate developers and real estate
Right. Petty
like realtors.
bourgeois.
Yeah, exactly. And then when they finally got caught for being like publicly uh, openly breaking the law, they do like the surprise Pikachu face. They're like, "Oh, we got caught! Like, no way." Our consequences. We're facing the consequences of our actions.
Can't believe
That's
this.
that's why I think it's funny. Like, I don't really care about the Capitol. Like, I think it's messed up, but I don't know. Like, liberals blew it way out of the water. Like, oh, this is the next 9/11.
Right?
It's like, no. I mean, it wasn't great, but it's also kind of funny to like see people uh,
I think it's
be
funny now that it's been
performing.
revealed that they were petty bourgeois. Like if they were workers, it would be sad. It would be like, oh my gosh, workers in this country are so discontented that they're ready to storm the Capitol, but they've fallen for Trump, this populist demagogue. But since it's like petty bourgeois, like real estate developers, it's like, yeah, like you said, it's these people just haven't been used to paying for, any consequences for their actions, and now they have to, and they're like,
Mhm.
huh?
It's awesome.
It is.
I
I have.
watched a couple of watched a couple of like the interrogation videos of some of the people, and they're just so surprised that they're even sitting in an interrogation room, let alone like having to answer to police. It's kind of awesome.
That is crazy. Um, I there's a really good comment here. It looks like someone who is either from Peru or who is really up to
Yeah,
date with what's been going on.
boy.
Oh, thank you for the subscription, Lanky Melon. So it says the Castile bloc were recent arrivals to Peru Libre, charismatic, a man of the countryside, and a rondero. He took the party by storm with his populism, charisma, etc., and with his program calling for nationalizations, kicking out imperialist groups like the Lima Group. However, he was also unwilling to align himself with Chavismo, absolutely, which also Lula in Brazil has also not aligned himself with Chavismo, or has been unwilling to, but unwilling to align himself with Chavismo, Venezuela, Cuba, etc. Yes, like the hardcore Marxist revolutions in Latin America. Lula in Brazil and Castillo have both been like populist lefties who have kind of backed away from like communism fully and Marxism, Leninism as it exists in countries like Cuba. Um, so they are used as boogeymen in Latin America, this comment says. I was afraid the party wouldn't find unity among the new bloc and the Marxist-Leninist party heads. And you were correct, comrade. Another comment, and it seems that has come true. There hasn't been a lot of organization. Some governmental posts still haven't been filled, and there's a Congress that is obstructing anything they do. It's very depressing. Yes, and like I said, this shows sort of the faults of the electoral route, right, of having a socialist revolution that takes power via the ballot box. It's very easy for the opposition to block all the good things you try and do to bring about socialist construction. So I don't know, the last part of that comment here says, I don't know if we can throw Castillo out the window yet, but this is what happens when you don't build the support on the ground like the MAS, the Movement for Socialism in Bolivia. That's what the MAS is. His biggest campaign attraction was getting a vote on rewriting the Constitution. Let's see if he can achieve that. Yes, and I know many Peruvians, especially indigenous Peruvians, are really hoping he can rewrite the Constitution, because the Constitution has like racist and right-wing reactionary neoliberal crap in it. So a lot of people were hoping that he would get that Constitution rewritten. So yeah, I'm just hoping for that at this point and hoping for as little neoliberal backslide as possible. But yeah, organization on the ground is the key, as this commenter says. What do you think about that, Matt? If you were listening.
Yeah, that's a lot. No,
Sorry.
I was. Yeah. So, I liked how you connected that. He didn't. Castillo didn't build up like the ground, build up the movement from the ground up. He kind of worked with, like within the party and used like the party heads rather than the people to build his movement. And that kind of reminded me. Did you see the 7-day march in Bolivia?
I did not. Been out of the news cycle lately.
So Luis Arce led thousands of people in a 200 kilometer march in defense of Bolivia's democracy, and it was a really cool. Here, I'll send it to you in the Discord.
Yeah, that would be great. What's up? You can come in. Again. Everyone's gonna get to meet my roommate Matt.
You got anything else to add for that though?
No, I don't see where you sent the thing in the Discord actually. Oh, there it is. People's Dispatch. Fire. I'm gonna show this to the audience. 7-day march in defense of democracy concludes in Bolivia. Yeah, it's like that comment says. Bolivia has been really successful in organizing people on the ground and getting them into the MAS. And so, like, Castillo was a populist taken from, like, the trade unions in Peru. So it was like the Marxist-Leninist party took this guy, this, like, popular populist who wasn't necessarily a Marxist and, just tried to make it happen, tried to win the election. Versus Bolivia has had all this organization on the ground, and the MAS, the Movement for Socialism, is deeply connected with the trade unions. When the U.S. was doing their coup, which Elon Musk famously supported on Twitter, the first thing that they did was attack trade unionists. Orlando Gutierrez was one of the main organizers and leaders. One of the at the heads of one of the Bolivian trade unions. And he was someone who was killed by the right-wing fascistic forces that the U.S. was supporting and the CIA was supporting. So they need organization, and after that happened, a bunch of people on the ground, including the trade unionists, were calling for Luis Arce and or Evo Morales, or the party in general, to arm the revolution, right? To say, yes, we took power via the ballot box, via elections, but now, the U.S. and the bourgeoisie in Bolivia are going to try and kill us. They're going to try and retake power, create or turn Bolivia back into a neoliberal country by force, through the U.S. support of these right-wing fascist gangs. So now, the time is to arm the country, to arm people, so that they can maintain democracy, right? So that they can force out these right-wing violent neoliberal forces and continue to construct socialism. So the March for Democracy, led by Arce, is kind of an example of that and a show of that. Like, look how much organization we have. Look how much support we have for socialism, and for our party on the ground. And that's a huge reason why Bolivia has been successful, despite taking power via the ballot box, which comes with many risks, as we've been talking about this whole stream.
Yeah, I think the march was just a cool display of solidarity with one another, especially being led by the new president, especially after the last 2.5 years of what's been happening in Bolivia. Like after Morales was ousted and Jenny Yanez came to power and very openly was like, yeah, we're going to create a Catholic fascist state here. We're not going to care about indigenous people, etc. And then they have another election, and Arce, the finance minister under Morales, ends up taking power. And they have this solidarity march in favor of democracy, in defense of democracy, and I think that's a really cool sign.
It is cool, and I mean, that's the key to socialism, regardless of whether you're taking power via the ballot box or, a revolutionary struggle, is having the people support on your side, right? Without popular support, there's nothing. And Bolivia has created a really popular program of giving sovereignty and giving just more political, economic, and just rights in general to their indigenous populations, while also carrying out these policies of nationalization, of development, of poverty alleviation, creating these new social programs which are funded by the nationalized industries that were nationalized under the Socialist Party. So they've had they've really focused on popular support, gaining popular support and serving the people, as has China, which is why the people there are still so loyal to the parties, right? It's not just that these countries, these socialist countries, rule every member of their population with an iron fist. It's that largely they've gotten the support of their people, through serving serving the people and raising their standard of living. Bolivia and China have kept their populations dedicated to the revolution and the continuation of the revolutionary struggle and constructing socialism, which is, what socialism's supposed to be all about. So solidarity with Bolivia there, killing it as usual.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
I think Bolivia is like one of my favorite examples of just like a successful socialist state, both economically and socially. They again are very progressive, as you'd use the term in America, very progressive when it comes to indigenous rights, gay rights, I believe, and just other minority rights in general. They're really trying to get equality around both socially and economically, which is one of my favorite things about that nation.
Absolutely. And what you're tying it to Honduras and Nicaragua, which we've been talking about, you've seen this with Nicaragua and you're already seeing this with Honduras. There's a battle on the ground over abortion rights, because these countries are highly religious, deeply Catholic, And traditionally, especially in the rural areas, people are not in favor of abortion. So there's a struggle. And what the U.S. media is going to do is say, look at how non progressive these countries are, right? Look at how right wing these countries are, calling themselves socialist progressives, yet, not banning abortion. When it's a struggle on the ground, right? It's a struggle between people. But what you're seeing is that the more education there is, right? The more of these social programs and literacy programs and other things are funded, the more sort of progressive people's social views become, right? So we forget that people's social views are often a product of their material conditions and the environment that they grow up in. And one of the first things to do first is to meet people's material needs, right? And to get people educated. And then, it's very likely that society will start moving towards more progressive social views once people's material needs are met. In my opinion, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, that's it. I almost verbatim had this conversation yesterday with a commenter in one of my TikToks. They were like, "Why do you support existing socialist states if they're so backwards on gay rights and other social problems within their countries?" And I basically said the same thing. I was like, I mean, America was homophobic until 2015 legally. Like in the law, gay people could not get married around the country. This person, their original argument was, it's a good thing that we tried to overthrow these countries because they're all homophobic in the 1980s. I was like, do you know what America's history is? Like, America has a horrible track record on minority rights in general. But yeah, I agree. I think that people become more socially progressive as they get more educated, and it's really hard to. I know this is going to sound kind of bad, but it's kind of hard to care about other people's rights if your material conditions aren't met. Like if you're not being able to eat, or if you're like struggling financially, whatever, you're going to be like, yeah, I kind of feel bad that they don't have equality, but I can't make it
Right.
me either. Like I have my own problems, but once you get your own needs met, then you can start fighting for other people's rights, I think. And once you get more educated too, and once you become in close contact with people of other backgrounds, I think that's really important too.